Welcome back to Serious About Rugby League's podcast. In the previous episode, we did talk about big expansions in this show, and we're happy to bring you back live from the Serious About Rugby League hub. We're joined today by Paul and Ben, and we're going to go through what we think is the greatest ever 13 in the Super League. So we'll start in number 1, fullback. There's loads and loads of contenders for this position. Chris Radlinski, Paul Wellens, Withers, Connolly, Webb, Hodgson. Recent contenders: Zach Airdacre, Sam Tompkins. Ben, who's your number 1?
Well, it's very tough. I think it's between 2 at the end of the day. Obviously, we've had Hardacre's 1 man of steel, Ben Barber's 1 man of steel, Sam Tompkins is 1 man of steel. So, I mean, it's a position where we've had a lot of great players, but for longevity, for consistency, and for an all-round player, I've got to go for Paul Wellens. I just think defensively, there's never been a better fullback in the competition. Attacking wise, he would always get his fair share of tries, and I think he was the heartbeat of that Saints team for well more than a decade. So I would just edge him over Chris Radlinski.
Yeah, well, between, as I said, the two are obviously Paul Wellens and Chris Radlinski. I think we're all in agreement with that. And these are the two that fought for the GB and the England shirt at the same time. And obviously, one of them came out on top in the early noughties, and then as time went on, the other came back out. Who's your pick?
Well, same as Ben. It had to be Wellens. I think some amazing names there. I remember, like I said, watching Sam Tompkins from about 2009, 2010. There was a 3 or 4 year spell before he went to the NRL when he was unplayable. It was a joy to watch for everybody. I remember one of the famous games when they won easy at Leeds. I think it was 2012. It was just stunning watching him play. But you've got to go back to early in the millennium, and it has to be between Radlinski and Wellens. And for me, again, as Ben said, I've never seen a defensive fullback like Paul Wellens. And I think it's become an attacking position now. I think the hallmark of a fullback is being able to defend, and no one can defend better than Paul Wellens. So it has to be Wellens for me. Yeah.
I did a similar team to this that combined Wigan and St Helens players, and I went for Wellens in that one. I've changed my mind in the last 6 months. I'm going to go for Radlinski. But as you said, there's so many of these players that have had special years, and Tompkins having that 4 year spell. Brent Webb was fantastic for Leeds in that long period. But I think Chris Radlinski and Paul Wellens.
So who we're going to go for?
I'm going for Radlinski.
I think you're outvoted.
I'm going for Radlinski. I think Wellens has took it.
Yeah.
So Paul Wellens. Okay, we'll move on to number 2 and number 5. So these are the wingers. Again, there's loads of choices. Ryan Hall was obviously fantastic for Leeds for a number of years. Pat Richards got a man of steel when he was at Wigan and was a vital part of that sort of rebuilding at Wigan. Going back earlier, you've got Leslie Van O'Connell, Jason Robinson, Brett Dallas even at Wigan. What do you reckon? We'll go to Paul first, actually.
Well, again, we've gone back to pretty much the inception of the Super League. I'd go for. I mean, Van O'Connell. I honestly can't imagine there's anyone that's seen him play that wouldn't put him in there all-time Super. I mean, just literally had everything. It's a pleasure to watch him. Obviously, except he was playing against your team, but it would have to be. And for me, I wasn't so sure about the second one. I mean, Ryan Hall, as much for what he does for Leeds as what he does for England. He seems to be an international player, but Robinson, you think of him because he wasn't in Super League very long, but I think the first grand final was 98, but Super League actually started itself in 96. So for me, there has to be a certain amount of time that you play in the league to get in the team. I think he's just about long enough. So again, maybe Robson and Van O'Connell. There's some brilliant names that we've wrote down, but again, I really do think them two pick themselves.
Well, I think if you look at that Bradford team from the early noughties, then they were almost unstoppable, weren't they? They were consistently at the top, and when you think of that team, you think of Big Les, don't you? Like powering down that wing, the amount of tries he got. And you talked about Ryan Hall there. Ryan Hall, obviously a great player international, but he never got to the figures Leslie Van O'Connell got to. Big Les was over 20 tries a season. He was devastating. He was unstoppable. And then I'm going to have to agree with you. I think you've got to go for the wow factor, haven't you? And Jason Robinson was probably the best winger of rugby league in this country for some time, and not only that, he went over and did it in rugby union as well and became arguably their best winger. I mean, for somebody to do that in
final, yeah,
exactly, yeah, for somebody to do that in both codes, and there are a lot of names, but for me, I think the wing spots pick themselves, and them two are certainties for me.
Yeah, I think that Bradford team, as you mentioned, 2003 treble winners. Obviously, that's the big season that they had. Viner Cole was an integral part of that, along with Harpy and other such players. Vi Corner even. But there's other players, like you said, Ryan, you mentioned Ryan, Pat Richards was, from 2007 to 2013, was probably the cog that kept Wigan going.
Man of Steel winner
in 2010 when they would come back and won the Super League.
It's on Richards, it's surprising because at the start when he first came, his form wasn't great. I think it was his kicking that kept him in the side in the early days of Richards.
And he started at fullback.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden people realised how good he actually was. Yeah, and he was part of the Wigan transformation from being the late 2000s onto when they became champions in 2010. He was part of all of that. But yeah,
it was the 2007 season, I think, that he started to really turn it around. He got his kicking percentage up to about 85-90%, and that's when Wigan started to push forward and you got that new era. But I think I do agree with you both. I think Viner Cole, though, is just the obvious one. I think Robinson for the wow factor, and if not for anything else, but that 1998 grand final winning try.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember
Super
so well.
try, yeah. Can't argue with that. That's what that final's remembered for at the end of the day. And it's the moments in it what you remember from Super League, and he's got like the first big moment of the competition, really.
Yeah. So Viner Cole and Robinson, I think.
Yeah,
in agreement.
I agree on that one. Yeah.
So let's move to the centres. Again, there's so many superb options that we've seen in this league over the years, and we keep forgetting how many big names have come through and gone into the history books and been forgotten about almost, and the centres is no different. Martin Gleeson, Gary Connolly, Ranulph, Newlove.
Yeah.
Give us one of your centres.
Well, yeah, the names you mentioned there, I mean, we could even mention Gary Connolly at fullback throughout Super League. He's an outstanding player, like exceptional. Again, both in attack and defence, a devastating player. But I've got to go for Keith Senior. I mean, for longevity, again, a bit like Paul Wellens, he was just an unbelievable player, like an out-and-out centre, would score tries, create tries, brilliant in defence. And when you think of that Leeds team, that golden generation coming through, he's one of the names you mention.
He was also there right at the start.
Yeah, Sheffield. Exactly, yeah. And he obviously writes for our website as well, so I've got to put him in, otherwise he'll like batter me.
Well, we've got Keith Senior's an option. Who else do you think, Paul?
For me, Senior was in my team as well, but the other one would definitely have to be Jamie Lyon. I mean, this is a guy. I mean, that Saints team, the middle 2000s. I mean, they're probably the best team that I've seen in Super League. He was the integral part of it. He's since went to the NRL and he's excelled over there. Played for the green and gold. Senior's right up there with him. But for me, the best centre I've seen in Super League has to be Jamie Lyon. It's just a shame he wasn't here even longer than he was. But I don't really think he could possibly leave him out of a team like that. So yeah, it would be like Lyon, and obviously I went with Senior as well. Yeah,
and I think people will be questioning the criteria for how you get into this team. But Jamie Lyon wasn't here for very long, 2 seasons? But in those 2 seasons, every single game he played, he was arguably the best player.
And not only that, St Helens went on to win multiple trophies because of that. And I think that's important. I think
that
you mentioned Jason Robinson. Obviously, it was at the sort of the boundary of sort of time spent deserved to be in this team. Whereas Jamie Lyon didn't spend as much time, but won a number of trophies along the way, and that's important to take into account. I think Jamie Lyon and Keith Senior are both my picks as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can wrap that up nicely and move on to standoff, which is actually one of the harder positions for me personally. I thought there's a number of options. Obviously, you've got Justin Harris, who was part of that Bradford side in the early noughties. Henry Paul for the same reason. Leon Price was the standoff for St Helens in that long period of success. If you're looking at Jamie Lyon in such a short period, you've got Trent Barrett, who's probably one of the most gifted rugby players we've ever seen play in this country. And then obviously you've got Danny Maguire, who's was a massive winner with Leeds. So there's lots of options. Lee Breers at Warrington as well. So there's lots of options for lots of different teams for lots of different reasons, but you can only have one. So what are we going for?
I'm totally with you. This was really, really tough. To be honest with you, I really, really wanted to put Lee Breeze in. I just love watching him play. I loved his attitude. He could wind players up. But people, I like players with attitude, but they have to be able to back it up. I don't like players with attitude who can't back up what they've got. But he certainly could. He was lovely to watch. But I'm sorry, the amount of grand finals he's won, it's got to be Danny Maguire. Really, it just has to be. Not unfortunately. As someone from the other side of the Pennines, I'd say unfortunately. But yeah, it has to be Danny Maguire.
Well, I'm obviously going to agree. Super League's all-time top try scorer. Like you say, the amount of grand finals he won, even his last ever game for Leeds, that 27 grand final against Castleford, controlled the game, and I'm still sat here now wondering why he's not a Leeds player, because we need him. But there's, like Sean said, there's a lot of contenders. I think you've got to mention Henry Paul as well. Played a lot of time at fullback, but an outstanding player, like a really, really good player. And he scored a lot of important tries in that Bradford team, but again, for longevity, for what he did over such a long period of time, it's got to be Danny Maguire. Still going now, so...
The only one so far picked that is still going. I agree with what you said about Danny Maguire, and he would probably be my pick, but I want to give a big shout out for Leon Price, because I know for myself, as a Wigan fan that was born in the mid-90s, my earliest memories of those big Wigan Saints games were Leon Price ripping us apart in the midfield, and I think it would be like he's almost been forgotten about because of his moves to Hull, etc. But in that period of time between 2005, 6, 7, when Saints were really at the best, Leon Price was right in the heart of it, and along with Lee Breeze, who was an integral part of moving that Warrington team forward. But I think out of those three, I think they're the three that I'm toying between. I think Danny Maguire just next. Not that it matters, because you two would have outvoted me anyway. So Danny Maguire is in the team.
Can I just say on Trent Barrett? Obviously, Trent Barrett on skill and ability and everything would have to be up there with all them. If not, probably the best player personally I've seen in Super League. But we keep talking about what kind of criteria we fit, and for me, I think it was only here 2 years, and they never played in the grand final, so it has to be part of the criteria has to be the impact the players have had on the side that they're in, and I think pretty much everyone that will have picked it up will have played in a grand final.
I think Trent Barrett was a special player, and there's no doubt in that. He's probably one of the best players I've ever seen, both internationally and domestically. It was just, as you said, not being able to play in that top level. He did some special things at Wigan. The big comeback at Bradford was obviously the high note that we always talk about. But I feel like not taking part in any major final is a massive knock against his name whilst he was at Wigan.
Obviously not his fault, but we have to bear that in mind.
Scrum-half. Scrum-half's an interesting one, because you've got some players that played for a couple of different clubs that did well at both clubs, and Paul Deacon being one of them, obviously helped Wigan win the Super League, and obviously was a massive part of that Bradford side of the early noughties, which I still consider to be the best teams I've ever played in Super League. So, along with that, you've got Sean Long, who was obviously part of the treble winning in 2006, Bobby Goulding, Adrian Lamb, who's now a coach in the Super League. So I'll start off, and I'll say for me, Sean Long is the number 7 of the Super League era. I think I was scared of playing him when I was younger. Obviously, being that he's from Wigan and went to St Helens, he's not a popular figure around Wigan, but nobody doubted his quality. And when he threw on an England shirt or a Great Britain shirt, we were all behind him, because we want him to do well. We knew his quality. Do you two agree?
Again, I mean, so when we did this, I thought it would take ages rolling through all these players. It's a pleasure to look at all of them and study their careers, but I think we have pretty much an agreement on most of them. In a game with Sean Long, I have to be personally, I used to be terrified when Rob Borra used to play against Wigan. He caused havoc running at the line, but I mean, again, we're talking about the impact that they've had on the game, and there's only one Sean Long.
Well, I have to agree. There's not really much more I can add on that, to be honest. I remember when Leeds beat St Helens 3 grand finals in a row, and every one of those grand finals, Sean Long was arguably the man of the match on the losing team. His kicking game, his awareness, his ability to control the team was just second to none, and yeah, he's the outstanding choice in that position.
I think that's, out of every position we've got, there's always one or two that are right up there, and you've got to make a tough call. But I think Sean Long is the standout in that area.
Without a doubt.
So we're going to move on to the props, and the props is actually quite interesting because a lot of these forwards that are being considered started in the back row and then moved to prop forward, and you've got to consider who made the biggest impact in the front row.
Yeah.
Go on, we'll start with you, Ben. There's a few names obviously that played in the famous Leeds sides. Who would be your starting number 8 or 10?
Well, obviously in the forward positions we have a lot more players who have been there and done it from for almost 2 decades. You look at the likes like Barry McDermott, you're looking at Andy Lynch, you're looking at these are Super League stalwarts, but there are 4 outstanding choices for me, and they're Jamie Peacock, James Graham, Stuart Fielden and Adrian Morley. I think for Moz and James Graham, perhaps their best years are split between Super League and the NRL. So for that reason, I've gone for Jamie Peacock and Stuart Fielden. I just think in his prime, Stuart Fielden was almost unplayable. His aggression, even at a young age, he was willing to take it to anybody. I remember his famous scraps with Barry McDermott. And then Jamie Peacock, like you say, he played in the back row, started in the back row, but he moved to prop, and he was just an outstanding leader. He was an unbelievable player. And you talk about halfbacks controlling the game. Well, he actually controlled the game from the forwards. He would literally decide games on his own. He would lead from the front in every game he played. He would be the outstanding player in almost every game he played. And I don't think I've ever seen a forward get as much ball as Jamie Peacock got. He just used to demand it and cart it forward every other tackle. So yeah, I have to go for Peacock and Fielden.
Well, I went with Peacock as well. He was my number 1 choice. There's no doubt. In honour of the man, honestly, what he achieved at Leeds is incredible, and previous at Bradford. But for me, the second was pretty much a straight choice between James Graham and Morley. Someone else had considered Paul Anderson. He was a hell of a forward to stop, but I just went with Morley. And probably his best days were probably in the NRL, but obviously he had to prove it in Super League, or he wouldn't have got the deal he got in the NRL. So again, such an inspirational leader when he came back to Super League. To be fair, I think all of it was hard, but I think the hardest choice I had of all was probably between James Graham. He was a legend at St Helens before he went down under, but it was between Graham and
Adrian Morley.
And Adrian Morley, and I just went with Morley.
I think we're all in agreement that Peacock, given his stature and trophies that he won, he's got to be in there. I am interested to see that you picked Stuart Fielden. I think Stuart Fielden was outstanding at Bradford, obviously, in that team led by Brian Noble that was just unstoppable. It was an unstoppable team. And then obviously Brian Noble went to Wigan to sort of revive the survival campaign, and Stuart Fielden came with it. And Stuart Fielden sort of had a bit of a tough time in the mid-noughties, and then started coming back. And as soon as Wigan became a big team, he was the leader of the big team. He was half the reason that Wigan won the Super League in 2010, and obviously got his international callback because of that. So obviously very valid choice, and it's interesting because obviously you compare Graham and Morley having a lot of time in the NRL as well, and their best years maybe being in the NRL. I do think Morley is probably in the team just for me. I think he's when he came back to Warrington, and those years he had at Warrington at the end of his career were some of the most productive for him and for the Warrington side. I think he was the leader in a Warrington team that needed a leader to sort of push for trophies, and obviously they won the Challenge Cup a couple of times, and they've made a few grand finals, and I feel like having that leader with Breers and Morley was an integral part of that. But there's so many great forwards in time gone by that we've not talked about.
Yeah.
Terry O'Connor, Andy Lynch, Kylie Luluai was massive for Leeds alongside Jamie Peacock.
Yeah.
But I feel like Jamie Peacock and Ben has been slightly outvoted, so we'll go for Adrian Morley. We'll move to number 9, who controls the ruck. We'll jump in. Paul.
I think England fan now. I think we're quite blessed in this area at the moment in time. But there's been some truly tremendous ones. But again, I think this probably came down to pretty much a St Helens choice between James Roby and Kieran Cunningham. They played in the same side at some stage as well. But I think, well, I think we all have our own pictures of Kieran Cunningham, but I really couldn't look anywhere else. It had to be Cunningham for me.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, you're going to come in.
No.
I'm interested to see.
No, but I was gonna say for me, James Roby's obviously been world class in the last decade, and but I don't feel like this choice is between Cunningham and Roby. I feel like it's between Cunningham and Newton. I feel like Newton was an outstanding figure, both for Wigan and for Bradford. An important part, and people might forget about his time at Bradford, because obviously they had that year where they lost to Wigan 31-30, and he was in that side, and he was
they brought him off, didn't they? I think
they finished third, and Newton comes off the field with 20 minutes left because Wigan are 24 points down, and Bradford loses because of it, because Newton was in control of that game. And if Bradford would have gone on to win that grand final, maybe we'd speak about Newton in a different way. I feel like because of that, and obviously the difference between Roby and Cunningham for me is the fact that Cunningham was the number 9 during that era of dominance in the mid-noughties, and Roby, through all these fantastic work, has struggled to get the titles behind his belt. Obviously he's had a tougher Leeds team to contend with along those years, but he's really struggled to get the trophies under his belt in the same way Cunningham did. So for me, Cunningham just comes out on top ahead of Newton.
Well, yeah, there's some names that we've not mentioned. You've got Jimmy Lowes. We talk about players who've come over and done it for a couple of seasons, have been outstanding. Danny Baderas in that bracket for Leeds. You've got Danny Houghton, who's won a Man of Steel. Richard Swain, who the Hull fans would have loved.
I think Danny Houghton's actually probably my favourite hooker, probably one of the favourite players in the league, but certainly my favourite hooker. Danny Houghton, obviously, I mean, we're talking about, he's not at the level of Roby as a player, but just his enthusiasm, how he makes... It gives everything on the field, and he makes everything of his talent. Everything that he is, it's tremendous role model for the game.
Yeah, I agree. And Darryl Clark's another former Man of Steel winner. You've got to consider, but again, I agree. There's 3 choices, and I would probably just about agree with you. I would say Roby might be able to get above Newton, but yeah, I think just through no fault of his own, maybe just lacking the titles. And Terry Newton, what a player, what an unbelievable player. I mean, it was so sad, obviously, what happened to him, and but you've got to put him in that world class bracket, because on his day he was an outstanding player. But I think a lot of these choices for me have actually come down, maybe apart from Jamie Lyon, have come down to longevity, and Kieran Cunningham week in, week out was just fantastic for Saints, so he would be my choice as well.
Another one I forgot to mention was the Warrington revival, when they suddenly went from also Rans to being a big part of the league. I think Michael Monaghan was a massive part of that. I think if you speak to their fans, especially the 2011 season, when I think probably as much fun watching them as anybody in 2011. It was obviously not for you guys. It wasn't a Chelsea that won the grand final, but I think rugby league fans outside it probably was. We didn't even get there. They got the famous game at the HJ, but I think he was the integral part of that team. The revival as a club. I think another one we have to mention, but obviously, I'm happy with.
Yeah, Kieran Cunningham for that.
I think Kieran Cunningham, and that finishes the front row. It's not a bad looking front row, to be honest.
It's decent, to be fair. I wouldn't argue with it.
I think he'd have a decent record, yeah.
So let's get to the back row, and obviously there's similar to when back rowers go to prop. There's a lot of confusion about who's a second rower and who's a loose forward within the back row. So we'll start with number 11 and number 12. So out and out second rowers. I'm going to start proceedings with Lee Gilmore. I think he gets talked about nearly enough as he deserves to. He obviously had a great start at Wigan. During that late 90s into the 2000s. Then he went to Bradford, and he won a treble with Bradford.
Yep.
And then he went to St Helens, and he won a treble with St Helens. In terms of, if we're going to talk about trophies, Lee Gilmore, he's been there with every team he's played for, and he's won stuff.
That's a very good argument. He's not actually in my team, but for somebody to win trebles at 2 separate teams is incredible, really, considering how rare they are. Yeah, there are a number of players in this position I've looked at. There's players like Daniel Gardner, who at Bradford was outstanding for him. He was only there like 4 seasons, but he won 2 grand finals. He was an outstanding player. I think he won a Challenge Cup as well. And then we've had more recently John Bateman. He's outstanding. We've had Steve Menzies come over, maybe not in the prime of his career. But I've actually gone in that number 11 position. I've gone for Chris Joynt. For Saints, he was an outstanding player in their back row.
Scorer of the famous wide to west try.
Yeah, of
I
course.
think people forget that he actually scored the try.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and I watched that try back so many times, and I think somebody just ankle tapped him. But I think his sheer pace got him away, and he was one of those players, Chris Joynt, who you perhaps probably lined up against, and you probably didn't really fear much about him, but in reality he actually had it all. He had strength, power, and a good offload, and he would make a break on the edges, and he scored a lot of tries, and that's the reason I've put him in. And he won a lot of titles, maybe not as many as Lee Gilmore, but yeah, I went for Joynt in that position.
Yep, I went for Joynt as well. There's a lot of other second rows that we looked at. I mean, again, I think we've pretty much gone for the same. But there's Ali Lawati. There were times that he was totally unplayable at times. Giant of a man, and
one hand, won it.
I remember the games at Wigan. Yeah, he's just running with the ball like this, incredible to watch. And obviously another player who we haven't wrote down, but sometimes gets a little bit derided. But John Wilkin, we have to think how long he was at St Helens winning trophies again. And if you look at back, especially if you know his last few years at St Helens, when obviously time was starting to catch up. We look back to maybe 10 years ago, he was a hell of a player. Tough as nails, very, very good on the ball. Some of his offloads absolutely incredible. See, he's definitely another one that I definitely looked at. But
yeah, one thing I'd say about John Wilkin, he gets a lot of stick, but I'm not really sure why. He's always been a great player for me, and there's not many back rowers like him who could just pull a 40-20 out of nowhere, or who could, like you said, do
in the halves.
Do like a cut-out pass. He was a superb player, very underrated, and gets a lot of undeserved stick in my opinion.
I think that there's 3 that are still playing that are in that bracket, to be honest, where they get a bit more stick than they probably deserve. Ben Westwood and Jamie Jones Buchanan being the other 2 that are, maybe obviously they're coming towards the end of their careers and they're not going to be playing at the same level that they played 5 years ago, but they're still a massive part of the respective sides that they're playing in, and maybe don't deserve as much criticism as they get. So you've gone for Chris Joynt, and who was your second?
I've gone for Gareth Ellis. Sorry, I didn't even mention that.
You've not even mentioned Gareth Ellis yet.
But that was to come, wasn't it?
Well, what else to say about Gareth Ellis? Another one who went to the NRL and won West Tigers Player of the Year 3 years on the trot. But he's come out of retirement now, hasn't he, Gareth Ellis? And he's turned the whole season around.
He's still having an influence on the whole team now. I think they're missing him when he's not there. He's absolutely incredible.
He's just a natural leader, and he's been like that since he was younger. Since Leeds signed him from Wakefield when he was in his early 20s, he was outstanding for Leeds, and Wakefield tried everything to keep hold of him, and he was part of that golden generation Leeds team that won numerous grand finals and went over to West Tigers. And I just think at every club he's been at, he's been an outstanding player, and that for me is why he should be in this team. And I'd add as well, I've never seen any player in a team with Jamie Peacock make more yards than Jamie Peacock, but Gareth Ellis was one of them.
So I'm assuming you agree with that.
I think when he went to the NRL, there wasn't even an argument of would it be a success there. It stood out. He stood out a mile. The colossus of a man, like we said before, he's still doing it now. You can tell when he's not in the whole side. It makes such a difference. The young players look up to him so much.
Yeah. I think I think Lee Gilmore's my starting second row. I've been outvoted by you 2. I think Joynt and Ellis for my second and third. I'd have probably gone Ellis over Joynt, but Lee Gilmore unfortunately misses out, so we're going to go with Joynt and Ellis in the back row.
Yeah.
One person... It's alright, I'll get outvoted all the way through. One person we haven't looked at in the back row who I was considering for the back row is somebody that we're going to talk about in a minute for a loose forward position, which is Paul Sculthorpe. Sculthorpe obviously started in the back row and then moved to 13 as his career went on. We're going to have to look at the loose forwards, and obviously there's going to be the same debate as we had for the full-backs, even though I feel like there should be more names involved. So yeah, as for full-back, we had the Wigan number 1 versus the St Helens number 1. I feel like loose forward, we're going to talk about the Wigan number 13 against St Helens number 13, so let's start with that. Paul Sculthorpe.
Well, also versus the Leeds number 13, I'd add Kevin Sinfield did move to stand-off in the last stage of his career, but for the majority of it, he did play at loose forward.
I feel like with Kevin Sinfield, the thing is, he's remembered for that period at the end of his career where Leeds were winning trophies when they shouldn't have won trophies. Obviously, they were a good team, and he played in that period at 6-7. That's the reason that I wouldn't probably consider him because I don't see him.
You didn't think that treble-winning team deserved to win those trophies, no?
No, obviously they deserve to win. But I'm at the 2000 and forget about
Probably
that.
not the league leadership.
Yeah, maybe not. I was there against Huddersfield that day when Ryan Oldham down the wing.
Oh yeah, I think you have to consider. Incredible. I haven't picked Kevin Sinfield, but he has to be. Yeah. He has to be considered. We've got other names in here like Adrian Vowles won a Man of Steel. Jason Smith I've heard Hull fans say he's the best player they've ever seen. So we've got to mention those names. I've gone for Paul Sculthorpe. I know you perhaps wanted to put him in the back row to accommodate.
So yeah, but we'll talk about Paul Sculthorpe, Andy Farrell, and obviously Paul Sculthorpe was incredible at what he did. Andy Farrell was exactly the same. They were both captains of their respective sides. Back then, in the early noughties, probably the height of the Good Friday Derby, because both teams were first, second most seasons and were always on top of each other. And you had the two 13s that were both fighting out for GB captaincy and
at a young age as well.
And at a young age.
Farrell.
Obviously, Farrell was the youngest ever international captain.
And he could kick goals as well.
Yeah. So Andy Farrell and Paul Sculthorpe they were similar players in many respects, and obviously had that big face-off in 2002.
Probably one of the most famous moments in the sports history. Yeah. Another one, obviously, Sean O'Loughlin, the Wigan captain now. He's obviously been going since the early 2000s. He's been smashing into forwards since he was 17-year-old. I think people talk about his injuries, but just look at the amount of games that he's played. Obviously, if you're slamming into big guys at that young an age, in your late 20s, early 30s, that is going to have a massive effect. Yes, I think Sean Wayne managed him very well in certain games and brought him out when Wigan needed a win. But that's because basically without him, Wigan probably wouldn't have won. I think 2013, I think Tompkins was looking the best player in the league, but I think Wigan fans then knew that the key player in that side was Sean O'Loughlin. I remember Nathan Brown once saying he was the best English player in rugby league. I think if you look at comments from players on Twitter when they're playing for England, they just marvel about how good he is. His best years are probably behind him, but Sean O'Loughlin would have to be considered. But again, I think as you said, we could have put Sculthorpe in the back row, but I think we had to really make this a choice between the two of them, and as opposed to putting them both in the team. I personally went for Farrell. The guy's just a born leader. He's still doing it now as a coach. He went to uni, scored a try in a World Cup for England. There's nothing more you can say about them. Both of them would easily lead this side that we have here, but it had to be Farrell for me.
So the problem is here that I've got the sort of deciding vote here, and I disagree with you both because I think it has to be Sean O'Loughlin. I think Sean O'Loughlin.
Why do you have the deciding vote?
Well, because you said Sculthorpe and he said Farrell. So
it's very
true. Either one of those two, and it's the deciding vote. I think Sean O'Loughlin deserves it. I think for me, and this is probably sort of my era of watching Wigan. The problem is that if I speak to my granddad who texts me to games, he's going to talk about Farrell. If you speak to me, I'm going to talk about Sean O'Loughlin. I feel like it's because of that continuous being able to watch them week in, week out. And obviously I only got a couple of years of Farrell at the back end of his Wigan career before he went to Rugby Union, whereas I've had Sean O'Loughlin since 2003 onwards. And obviously he was part of that squad. They didn't make the final, but he part of the squad that made the 2003 final. And then from there took the captaincy at such a young age, and from 2005 onwards has led the Wigan team to obviously all the success that's come in the previous decade. So for me, we're talking about captains, leaders, and loose forwards. I think he rejuvenated that position, and that's why I would pick him as a 13. So we've got a cross area because we all want a number 13.
Well, my argument for Sculthorpe, I just thought he was the best all-rounder, and I remember watching him as I was starting to get into rugby league when I was younger. I remember Great Britain playing Australia, and he outplayed every Australian forward on that field. Obviously, Andy Farrell and Sean O'Loughlin, two outstanding players as well, so I can't really... It's a toss of a coin, really, between the three of them.
It literally is a toss of a coin.
Well, I come into sport late. I come into rugby league through marriage, really. But my first live game, since I was at school, was 2001. Was GB Australia at Huddersfield, I think it was. And not knowing a great deal about all the players on the pitch, two Great Britain players stood out on that day. One was Keith Senior, not just for the hair, but for definitely the way he played. And the other one was Paul Sculthorpe.
Ooh. I'm getting a bit of back in here.
I'm quite happy to go.
Would you let Sculthorpe or O'Loughlin?
I would have to say Sculthorpe.
Ooh, I feel that's.
And would you go Sculthorpe or Farrell?
I'd go Farrell.
Of course you would.
Of course I would. But I mean, it's not denied. I'll good Sculthorpe. How about this? How about you guys decide for us?
No, we've got to make a decision.
Sculthorpe, Farrell, O'Loughlin.
I mean, I can't say Sean O'Loughlin wouldn't fit in that team because he's an unbelievable player. So I would be happy to put him in, albeit when I say happy, like a little bit mad. But I'll reluctantly put him in.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Sculthorpe and Farrell were the big forward, loose forward.
Yeah.
Like they were the hard runners that controlled the team. Whereas O'Loughlin's that sort of new breed of 13 where they run hard but they have the hands and the kicking game that sort of try and lead the team through. That's the only reason that I would pick O'Loughlin personally. I think he's strong defensively, he can run like a prop, and he's got the hands of an halfback.
Yep. We'll go O'Loughlin then.
Right, well, that was probably the hardest part. I knew that it would always come hard towards the end. Thank you for watching, listening. We're hopefully going to be bringing you more and more of these podcasts and long discussions as the week goes on. So please give us your thoughts and feedback, and see you next time.
Watch every game of the NRL, plus the grand final and state of origin from anywhere outside Australia, New Zealand or the Pacific Islands. Go to watchnrl.com and take the footy with you.